Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I'd also like to thank Anna San Miguel of Alberta Law Libraries for making this possible. I'm Patricia Byrne, Executive Director of People's Law School. The purpose of our getting together today is to introduce you to People's Law. So we're going to cover who we are, what we do, how we can help you, and how you can help us. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, David Candiston. David, could you say a few words about yourself and then set the ground rules for our session?
Sure. Thanks, Patricia. And thank you, everybody, again for coming. I'm David Candiston. I'm a lawyer, and I also run our marketing and communications over at People's Law School. And today we're going to take you through about a 30 to 45-minute presentation, depending on how many questions we get at the end, mostly just about us. We'll show you our website. We'll show you some of the tools that we have on our website, and we'll show you how we go through answering questions that the public has on everyday legal issues and the different types of resources that we can provide. So I'll be sharing my screen for most of the time and cycling through different tabs on my browser to show you the different parts of our website. If you have questions, we're going to leave a bunch of time at the end for any questions you might have, whether it's about the content that we have or how our website works or how our chatbot works. So keep them in mind. And if you want to type them into the chat or the Q&A, we can keep them there and ask them at the end. But otherwise, we want this to be interactive. If there's things that you are curious about, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A right away. I'll be monitoring that in the corner, and I might get to them if it makes sense at that point in time. Otherwise, we'll do it at the end, and we'll run through it that way. So Patricia, I'll hand it back to you, and you could talk a little bit about who we are.
Super, thanks, David. So you may be asking, what is People's Law School? First of all, we're a team. We're 7 lawyers plus tech and accounting support. And there you see on your screen, that's us. Secondly, we're a nonprofit incorporated BC society. No, we are not a law school. We do not accredit anybody to become a lawyer. What we do is we create BC-based information and resources for the public and for those who help them on common legal issues that people may encounter in their daily lives. We call these everyday legal problems. And in a few moments, we'll show you some examples of these problems and how we help folks avoid or resolve them. Everything we provide is free. We don't charge for our print or web-based resources. And we've been doing this since 1972. We're Canada's first PLEI organization. PLEI, as you know, stands for Public Legal Education and Information. And we're BC's only organization dedicated exclusively to PLEI. So that means we focus on understanding the legal information needs of British Columbians and making sure that the information we provide is of high quality and relevance and put in a language that people will understand. In other words, no legalese. And what you see on your screen now is a snapshot of the growth in users of just one of our resources, our peopleslawschool.ca website. And when you combine this website and another website we have, which is called Dial-A-Law, we have about close to 1 million users of our 2 websites combined in 1 year. So next slide, David. Why is PLEI important? Well, we believe that public legal education is an essential component of a just society. It gives people access to justice. It empowers people. It fosters public understanding and trust of the justice system. And we think that by providing accurate and accessible legal information, people can avoid legal problems before they arise, or they can take action to resolve them. And by doing this, they can avoid more complex problems or litigation. So that's the theory. Now we're going to show you how we do this. First off, we're going to introduce you to some actual real-life people, not actors, who used our resources and got value from them.
It's important to know your rights. It's important to get as much information, learn as much as you possibly can. My name is Benno Haley, and this is my wife.
Hi, my name is Putana Kumtulun.
And we have 3 beautiful kids.
5, 4, and 3. My dad passed away in Thailand. That's when I realized that Dad has left me a will.
We have never dealt with the law before. Will, executorship, probate. We felt alone, I guess, to figure out things for ourselves. What do we do? So that's when I went online. That's when we discovered People's Law School. It was exactly what we needed. What really hit home for us was the webinars. Just the interactive piece of it, meaning I can ask any questions through the chat. We have 3 kids, crazy household, we have a business. And again, there's a lot on our plates. We had a whole bunch of information that totally helped us. It's very personable, it's very flexible, you can access it at home. Now in our current situation, we're like, okay, we're at a good place where we feel comfortable that we can take the next step with more
Clarity.
More clarity, yes. It gave us way more confidence. I would definitely recommend the resources that are available, especially if you have no clue, no idea, I would say even confidence, like where do I begin? I would definitely start with People's Law School.
Okay, so first, what I want to show everybody is how we organize and present our content to the public. So we have 2 principal websites that we run. The first one is the People's Law School website, and I'll show you a still of that on my screen. And this is how we present information here to help people work out everyday legal problems in British Columbia. We contrast this with our Dial the Law website, which is more of a starting point for information on the law in British Columbia. You can access all of the information on both sites, regardless of where you land, whether from a Google search or from an outside link. If you're on Dial the Law, you can find stuff on People's Law and vice versa. So they're unified. And we did a lot of work making sure that works actually quite recently by getting us onto a more headless content management system called Contentful. And this is just a quick still of the back end of how it all works, but it pretty much organizes all of our information and makes it really easy to make changes, to update things, to move things around and put them into different places so that we're not, stuck within maybe a more old-fashioned template, which we used to have before. Just ensures that everybody can find anything when they're on our sites. Otherwise, internally, we power everything we do through the Google Suite. So we use Google Sheets and Google Docs quite a bit, mainly so that our team can share information across documents and information, but also just to help facilitate legal review when we send out newly drafted pages to lawyers in those subject domains for them to vet it for accuracy. It's a very easy way for them to put in their comments and track changes and things like that. So, nothing revolutionary, but we found it super helpful to use the Google Business Suite on that front. We do lots of webinars. We typically host them, we always host them through Zoom, and we archive them all on our website here. So anything that we've done gets recorded, and then we put up the recording into each page so that people can watch them again, just in case they registered and didn't have a chance to take a look at it, or in case they want to look at it again. So one example, more recent one we did on co-ownership of a home in BC, we have the recording here. And we also put in highlights just so that people can scrub to the things that make the most sense for them. So they don't necessarily have to watch a 60-minute webinar. The final thing is our chatbot, which is called Beagle Plus, and the various softwares and plugins and APIs that go with it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So Beagle is powered by ChatGPT 4, and it answers questions from the public on topics covered from our website. So someone might end up here, they click on here, and they can ask a question. And I'll go through a bunch of different types of question scenarios that have come up from our users after this slide, so you can see how Beagle answers the questions. But this is basically the size of it, of how it shows up. And the thing about Beagle and building it and getting it ready up to this point is we wanted to make sure of a few things. First is that it would only take information from our site, because we know that the stuff on our site is reliable, vetted by lawyers, and will give people not only good information, but good step-by-step instructions in order for them to be able to solve their problems. Lots of chatbots out there don't necessarily have that instruction to source just from a certain site, either because that site doesn't have all the information, or they just didn't bother putting those instructions in there. But we wanted to make sure that was in place so that we know that all the information that comes out is reliable. A few other things about Beagle is we spent a lot of time just developing its personality, I suppose, so that people know that it's a bot, but some people don't necessarily. So we spent a lot of time giving it instructions to be empathetic, to write things at I think a grade 8 or a grade 9 level at maximum so that it's in plain language and that people can understand it. And again, and I mentioned this just before, to give step-by-step instructions, because to see just a huge block of paragraphs of text, and we've done some user testing on this, it's overwhelming. So when we break it down into manageable chunks, we find people are able to self-help a little bit better in those scenarios. And finally, we've done a lot of user feedback and just feedback mechanisms so that we could find out if Beagle is helpful. And so far, almost 80% of our users have found it helpful. So there's like a little thumbs up, thumbs down icon that pops up from time to time, just so that we can get real-time feedback as to whether the bot is performing well. A couple other things that we use with Beagle to check the conversations is an app called Retool. Here is a screenshot of what that looks like now. And this logs all of the conversations that go into Beagle, whether it's someone asking one question or if it's multiple turns of a conversation. We see it all in here. And this enables us to get stats around what are the most popular topics people are asking about. Are there certain answers that just aren't that great or aren't quite finding our content in the right way? So we can put little tags in here to make sure that we look at those again and figure out ways to get Beagle to get to the right answer. So it's been a long journey, and Beagle at first wasn't perfect and is slowly skewing in that direction, I suppose, in terms of perfection. Not every conversation produces the best answer for a person. Some people are, disappointed or not necessarily happy because there's a thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism. But on the whole, this gives us a window into what people are asking and how the bot can be improved over time.
And usually people aren't unhappy, or quite frequently, I should say, because we didn't provide them with quote unquote legal advice. We didn't provide them, or Beagle, I should say, didn't provide them with specific information and a decision of what they should do. We don't do that because we don't provide legal advice. And sometimes people, that's what they're looking for. As much as we try to manage expectations around that, people will believe what they want to believe.
That's right. And towing that line has been, it's been difficult because you want to be able to provide ideas or steps that people can take, but we very much put up a red line at any recommendations, right? We would never want Beagle to tell people your recommended course of action is this, because we don't really know what the context is, right? People might ask a 1-2 line question without giving us all the information. And so giving them a course of action to choose, it's something better place for a lawyer to do. So we stop at that line of legal information, and there's only so many people that can be perfectly happy with that. Okay, so if you've got a legal question, how can People's Law help? So I'll run us through a few scenarios. And really my goal here is to show you the different ways in which our website can answer the question. So we'll go on to the first one. Oh, and another thing, because you're in Alberta, we're trying to focus as much on federal law issues and not BC law specific things. So you can imagine there's going to be lots of questions about divorce or the criminal court here so that we can avoid some of the civil law crossover that we might see. Okay, first one. Can I get a divorce without going to court? So people might just type this into Google, but hopefully if they've landed on our site and they're just looking for something like that, we have a search bar at the top. And this is powered by something called Algolia. And you might have seen these types of searches on the internet before, divorce without going to court. And it immediately starts popping up relevant information here. So even before you get to the without going to court, there's stuff here. So you have, how do I apply for divorce? Maybe that's not quite it. Desk order divorce, so it's a do-it-yourself divorce process. That sounds maybe a little bit more like what I'm looking for. And it takes you to one of our web pages. And this is a typical layout that you might see on Dial Law or on the People's Law website for how our information is presented to the public. We like to use lots of user stories that are short, to the point, but also really illustrate the content and help make it a little bit more relatable to people. And we organize things into drawers so the what you should know drawer tends to be the top of most pages. You can open and close these tabs to get more information on these different headings. And again, a lot of this is through user testing and finding out that if you have a page that just looks immediately like this, it can turn people off, right? It can make people think like, this is too much. I don't want to read this sort of thing. I can't handle this. And they just tune out. So keeping things in drawers has made it a lot easier for our users to navigate the site. And then we have the steps to give people the manageable chunks to figure things out. And also who can help, where you can find more information and more websites, and where you can get free or low-cost legal help on that specific issue if you want to speak to somebody one-on-one. Bottom of each page, we put which lawyer or who reviewed or reviewed this for legal accuracy. And we have little feedback mechanisms here to get more feedback from the public. So that's a good example of what a web page would look like and how people might search it. Second scenario. I know I have a good claim against my business partner, but I don't want to deal with a lawsuit. Is there another way to get a resolution? So not to show you things specific to BC law or how a business or partnership dispute might happen, but really I want to get at that skills content, which we spent a lot of time building out in the last year and a half, that's jurisdiction agnostic. So it is the kind of thing that, an Alberta user would be able to make use of on our site, even though the content is specific to BC law. So we have our taxonomy at the front, and in this section called resolving disputes, there's all kinds of things where you can have alternatives to going to court, dealing with difficult conversations, how-to guides, how to write a demand letter, what do you do if you get a legal demand letter. So here, if somebody wants to avoid going to court, this is what you might see on one of our People's Law School pages. We put these mythbusters at the beginning to draw people into the content. They tend to be 1 or 2 line questions that are either easy or hard, regardless. It's just a way to make it a little bit more interactive so that people can start clicking in and get a bit more engaged with the content. And again, this a little bit similar to what we see on our Dial Law website, but just the graphics are a little bit different here and the font. Sometimes we have common questions. These are things that we might get directly from the public that we'll incorporate into content later on, or stuff that we already put in from scratch because we know it's the kind of thing that people will be interested on. Can we do alternative ways if the lawsuit is underway? And similar sort of thing, finding a mediator or arbitrator, figuring out how to deal with collaborative practice, just to give people options. We don't know, we're trying to meet people where they're at. Maybe they're halfway through this, maybe they have just started. So we just want to give people the ability to take that next step to solve a problem. And again, at the bottom, it tells you who's reviewed it for legal accuracy and other pages that might relate to things that they're looking at. All right, jump to a third one. I'm a witness to a crime, but I'm worried about coming forward. Will the police protect my identity? So now I'm going to give you a little glimpse into how the things work with Beagle. So you can see it here on the right side of the screen. Someone will click here, chat with Beagle. Just take that question. So I'm a witness to a crime, but I'm worried about coming forward. Will the police protect my identity? Verifies if you're human.
There you have the chatbot in action.
Yeah, exactly. So as I mentioned, it leads with empathy. Being a witness can be daunting, especially if you're concerned about your safety or privacy. In BC, there's measures that can help, but it largely depends on the circumstances of the case. Talks about the possibility of keeping your identity sealed. Mentions that you might want to reach out for independent legal advice to discuss this because you might be concerned and we can't give you specific legal advice. And as often as possible, we instruct Beagle to provide links to pages on our website. So here you can explore resources on being a website from People's Law School. And this brings you to a page on our Dial Law site that talks about being a witness if you want to go more in depth or get more information. That's how Beagle works. And this is how that feedback mechanism that I mentioned before in terms of satisfaction pops up here at the bottom. But if you want more, you can ask for more, and you can continue asking Beagle questions in this thread to see what else it might be able to give you or tell you about being a witness, and it'll continue down that path. The most important thing is that it tries to find stuff from our website as much as possible. And if the question is just outside the scope of the law in general for sure, or outside the scope of BC, Beagle will be very specific to say, oh, it seems like you have a dispute, for example, in Ontario. However, I can only provide you with BC law, and here's what it's like, but you should consult a lawyer in Ontario to figure it out. So it wants to give answers, but we very much trained it to give as many of those caveats as possible upfront so that people don't necessarily think that it's always applicable, especially if they're from outside of the jurisdiction or from somewhere else. So that's an example of how Beagle works. And here, just have a couple testimonials from satisfied customers before I jump into the fourth and fifth questions. Looking for solutions for probating dad's will. I Googled my problem with Google. It's a lot of info. You don't know what is good. Many of the links led to people's law school. It's so smart and convenient with information written by lawyers. Took me step by step through each of the types of forms I have to fill out. I felt like I had my own coach. So the reason I really love this one is we've spent a lot of time just thinking about search engine optimization and how people type in their questions into Google when they have legal problems. And what we've learned is that people tend to write pretty specific things. Like in this instance, for example, like when they're looking at probate, they'll write, how do I fill out form P11 probate in British Columbia, rather than help with probate forms. And so by designing our pages to pick up on some of those more specific questions, more and more stuff that gets searched on Google that exists on our website will lead to our website. And I mean, it's been an interesting journey figuring that out, but it's definitely gotten more users to find us, which is great.
And if we see the same question being asked a number of times by people, we will create what we call a Q&A. And that is you may have seen that on our site. It's a specific area on our site that has frequently asked questions. And the question will be posed. We will provide the answer. And we find that presenting information in that Q&A format, helps with search engine optimization.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because it has the right titles that match some of the stories that people are putting into Google.
Yeah.
And I'll show you the Q&A section in just a second after I go through the second testimonial. So this is from someone who works at the Everyone Legal Clinic, which is run by Access Pro Bono here in BC. People's Law School was a tremendous resource for my clinical work and my articling work, both as a starting point to get oriented in a new area and as a referral resource for clients simply seeking accessible and free legal information. It's clearly labor of love and care, designed with ordinary people in mind, and is a go-to option for friends and family where they can learn more about a legal problem. And what we love about this is that helpers and intermediaries refer to our site in order to give legal information to their clients. So knowing that legal clinics in British Columbia find us to be a reliable source, and not only reliable, but digestible source for their users, is also just a good vote of confidence for what we're doing.
And David, if you'll permit me, I just want to read folks a comment from somebody from Access Pro Bono about how they use our resources. And this is I'm reading it now because it came in fairly recently. This is from Heather Wojcik. She's the Associate Executive Director and Staff Lawyer at Access Pro Bono Society of British Columbia. And she's praised Beagle Plus for being what she calls, quote unquote, a game changer in legal services. And here's how she uses it. She highlighted that intake staff and volunteers frequently refer individuals to Beagle Plus when no summary advice appointments are available, and when they, that is Access Pro Bono, identify clients who have the capacity to find their legal answers independently. So Access Pro Bono Society is using it as a indispensable tool to help them do their jobs.
Awesome. Yeah, and a big part of that is answering all these questions one-on-one. And I'll show you our Q&A section, has been part of what us as lawyers working at People's Law School do, is answering some of the public's questions. And when that started to get to a point where there were so many questions every week, having another tool like Beagle Plus to be able to answer these questions, and in some ways just as good and maybe even better than we can after thinking about it for an hour or so, it's just an excellent tool for us to have both internally and externally. So I've got a specific question about a separation agreement. Can you help me? So the answer is specific questions, not necessarily, right? Because we're not lawyers, we don't provide legal advice. But as Patricia mentioned, we have this Q&A section of our site, which you can access from the top bar of the navigation. And we've organized it based on our everyday legal problem heading. So there's 12 of them here that you can organize it by. And this aggregates some of the most common questions that we've gotten directly from the public, or that we've just seen online as being the types of questions that people have, but no reliable legal information exists. So as opposed to it looking more like our Work It Out pages where we have the different buckets and the steps you can take, these are just very specific questions with very specific answers. Again, not necessarily legal advice, but reviewed and vetted by a lawyer. And it gives you the information that you need to take the next step. This is one more specifically on security cameras and privacy issues, which are so confusing to so many. So just getting a bit more specific information on that can be helpful.
And you'll see, I'm sorry, David. I just wanted to,
Yeah.
yeah, can you go back to that, what you just, that page?
Mhm.
Yeah, under our legal reviewer, Andrea, you'll see that it was reviewed for legal accuracy in February 2025. That's pretty current. So again, we constantly review our content to ensure it's up to date. And we want to tell folks that so that they have some assurance and confidence in the quality of the information they're receiving from us.
Exactly. So just to go back to this main page on Q&A, if your question isn't here, hopefully you'll ask Beagle or you'll use our search bar. But if you go all the way to the bottom, and I don't mean to show this all the way to the bottom as if it's completely hidden there, because if you were to sort based on your specific issue, you would see less questions. And this would be more apparent. But you can submit your own question, and it takes you to a small form where you can fill it out. And then one of the people on our content development team will answer that question within a few business days. Again, not providing legal advice, but giving information that can help people take the next step. And we love the service. If we had hundreds of questions a month, it would become unwieldy. But because of all of the great things we have on our site and self-help tools, the amount of questions is manageable. And it also just gives us a way to reach out directly to the public and have them feel as if somebody actually is on the other end. Who cares, right? So we find this to be a very impactful service and a very manageable load on the people that work at our organization. That's the fourth scenario. Number 5. Your turn. What are some of the more common questions folks ask you or that are difficult to answer? We don't have to do this right away. I think it'll be better if we just wrap up our side of the presentation where we just, Patricia's going to speak for a little bit towards the end, and then think of some questions that you might get. They might be Alberta specific questions. I get it. I mean, hopefully there might be some more federal jurisdiction related questions in your mind, but even if they're not, we could pop them into Beagle or we could show you how we would find them on our website at the end of our presentation, just to show you another tool that you might be able to use. But for now, Patricia, I will pop it back over to you.
Yeah.
The last couple slides.
We were so glad when Anna and her team reached out to us to talk with you today, because well, we knew, that folks around the world use our resources because Google Analytics provides us with that kind of information. But if we can provide if we can provide frontline workers, librarians, others across Canada with federal information that's helpful to you and your clients, that's great. And you can help us by, you saw those many feedback mechanisms on our website. We want to hear from you. If you use our site, if you use our chatbot, we'd like to know what you think of it. And we'd like to know we'd like to hear suggestions for improvement. It's about continuous improvement, and we believe in that. And so people who use our resources are an important part of the feedback loop to us. So how you can help us, use the resources as they relate to you and your clients, and let us know how we did.
And another thing that I didn't mention while I was taking you through our site is our print publications. So we have this tab at the top, and we have all these publications that are available to the public for free. So it comes through Crown Publications. You can go in here, and if you think this might be something useful that you can keep on hand at your organization, I know that a lot of it is specific to BC law, but there are some things in here that are on federal jurisdiction, like the families and children stuff relating to divorce.
Or related to skills. I saw one there on unbundled legal services.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they offer that in Alberta, but if take a look at the brochure. If they do, then maybe you'll find that useful.
Yeah. Okay. Questions, comments, bookmark and check out our website. Ask people a question. Ask it a zinger if you want.
I see, David, a question has come in from Anna through chat, and she asks, how do we promote our webinars? I think you're the perfect person to answer that, David.
I am the perfect person to answer that because I promote the webinars. So we mostly promote through our email newsletter. And I'm just going to click on that tab below so that you can see the archive as it pops up. Our newsletter audience is now about 6,000 plus strong, and this is either people who have signed up to receive the newsletter or that have come to a webinar, asked us a question, have interacted in our website in some way, such that we've gotten them on the list, and they're a very active and excited user base. Our stats for our marketing, our email marketing campaigns are great. And this is the primary way in which we advertise our webinars. About 75 to 80% of our attendees find out about it through our newsletter. Maybe 15 to 20% find out about it through social media. And then there's little dribs and drabs, about 5% say they find out about it by word of mouth. So we do a little survey when people sign up by Zoom to hopefully click on it and say, how did you find out about us? So that we can allocate our resources accordingly in terms of getting people in the door. But it's mostly the newsletters. So what we'll do is we'll send out a newsletter when we get a webinar scheduled, about 2-3 weeks before, letting people know about it, do another push in the week before, and then do a reminder. And here's an example of an email I sent out last week talking about the strata problem, or dealing with strata problems webinar, which we had actually just today, just before our call, we had this webinar. And so we typically have 2 or 3 tiles and urge people to sign up and register. Good thing about our webinars is, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning, is we record all of them. So a big part of the marketing copy is, even if you can't be there, just sign up. You'll be the first in line to hear about the recording. And we find that on average, I think we have about 350, 375 people that sign up for each webinar, and the attendees are about half that, or maybe 55, 60%. But everybody gets access to it, right? And then we also get those people engaged and onto our mailing list and excited about what we're doing next. So it's mostly newsletters.
That's right. And as David said, post-webinar, everybody who's registered, regardless of where they attended, they get a copy of the video of the webinar, plus the show notes, plus some links to resources that are on topic and that might help. So not bad.
Yeah. Oh no, pretty good. I could show a quick example of that. This is the co-ownership one. I showed this at the beginning too. So just has everything you need. And another cool thing that Beagle does, I showed before that it had a pinpoint link to a site that talked about, understanding your rights as a witness to a crime. If you ask a question to Beagle that has an answer that is, for example, what happens when a co-owner wants to sell their portion of the property and the other co-owners don't want to sell theirs, it will include a link to minute 3325 of the webinar and take you to that portion of the video so you can watch it from there. So it can really crawl the entire site. And it's a big reason why we include these pinpoint links, is it just gives Beagle more ammunition to provide a really good answer to people. Because not everybody wants to read a page. Some people want to see a video. Some people want to look at an infographic. And we very much try to design our site to give people options to learn, if they all learn in different ways.
I just want to respond to a comment that came through here from Catherine. And she talks about organizations like ours and CPLEA are essential for self-represented litigants. Great work, team. And I just want to do a shout out for Jeff Surtees and his team at CPLEA. I talk with Jeff on a regular basis. He and I are both members of an umbrella organization of public legal information groups all across Canada. So he does a great job in Alberta, and shout out for Jeff and CPLEA.
And then we have another question. Can Beagle Plus handle other languages?
Aha! Good question.
The answer is very much a yes. So if you type in an answer in another language, Beagle will answer in that language, drawing questions, like drawing the answers from the site, but translating them in real time into another language. So let me just think of one that maybe we can ask in French. Si le contrat est annulé, est-ce que Rogers va payer des frais? I don't know what I can think of on the fly in French about a cell phone contract, because I've been recently working on this type of stuff. And so there you go. Beagle gives you an answer in French, talking about your rights depending on when you cancel the contract or when you don't.
Dans les deux langues officielles. Dans les deux langues officielles.
Dans les deux langues officielles. And also, I mean, we do get a lot of questions in Mandarin and in Punjabi, and we see these in our back end. Like I showed you this conversation log section. So this will put this will always write it in the language in which it comes in. So we get to see in real time if there are any languages that are other than English that are the more dominant ones. And there are definitely people who ask directly in a different language. So it's a good thing to have.
And actually, this is a good point. Generative AI, the type of technology that we're using, is a better translator than Google Translate. Generative AI understands context. It learns. And that's something that Google Translate does not do. One of the projects that we'd like to do in the upcoming year is to do some robust testing of generative AI and translation and integrate it with our chatbot. But you see, without that, it's it's not bad. Or as Anna would say, it's très cool. Actually, just a final point on this. I decided to test this out with some friends who speak languages other than French. And one of our friends, well, actually, it's Hannah from Pliac in Toronto. She speaks Russian. And she typed in a question in Russian to Beagle and got an answer that she thought was pretty good. Same thing with Punjabi. We have a large Punjabi-speaking community in British Columbia. So a colleague at a legal organization that serves the Punjabi population put in a few questions in Punjabi, got answers back that she thought were robust. All of this is anecdotal. And as I said, we'd like to do a little bit more robust testing on the language capabilities of Beagle and generative AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it takes time. Another refinement that we talked about is having the browser be aware of what language you're already in, so that this initial question from Beagle comes out in the language that you're already surfing in, so that people are fully aware that they could ask their question in another language. So as much as we do get those questions in other languages, we think there's a possibility that people just see it come up in English and immediately just, maybe they don't ask the question in another language because they don't think it supports it. So there's all these little bits and pieces and refinements that we have put in Beagle Plus along the way to make it work, and translation is definitely another frontier that we're looking forward to getting more information in. Another one is forms. We get a lot of questions where people ask, how do I fill out this part of this form, whether it's a court application form or a probate form. And it's an interesting area of the law because we very much would love to be able to provide this service. It sort of dances on that line between legal information and legal advice. But we're looking at ways that we can access PDF forms that already exist on court registry websites and find a way to pre-populate some of the answers in so that users can have more of a starting point than they currently have. Because I don't know if it's similar with everyone's experience in Alberta, but in BC, a lot of the times it's very well organized. You could find the form somewhere on the internet, but maybe you download it and you don't have Adobe Acrobat, or it doesn't open in your browser. And just hitting that one roadblock is enough for someone who's exasperated about the process anyway to say, oh, forget it, I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. So another refinement to Beagle might be finding a way to get those forms and removing that little bit of friction that prevents people from taking a next step. Because that's a big part of it, right? Is we just want to grease the wheels as much as we can so that people feel they can get some momentum in dealing with whatever problem they're dealing with.
Yeah, and we know in British Columbia that completing forms is a major pain point for British Columbians. I expect that's true for everyone across Canada. In Ontario, at the Community Legal Education Ontario, they're doing some really interesting work with generative AI and filling out forms. So they've got hundreds of forms in their family. I think their family, shouldn't say hundreds, many forms in their Pathways program there. And if you go on their site, Community Legal Education Ontario, you'll see what they've been able to do. And with a little bit more funding, if we ever get it this year, we may be able to take that step down the highway to helping folks with their forms.
Because I'll just tell you one thing that we already use. We have lots of template letters on our site. And right now, a lot of them are just documents that you can download, but we've been experimenting with other softwares that make it easier for people to fill out forms in real time so that they can have a demand letter or a complaint letter or something, or even a sample contract that people can start with. So we know that this is something that people like. There's a craving for this sort of thing, and finding the right way to do it has just been fun. But you need the funding and you need the will, and it takes time. And I think that's pretty much it. No more questions.
David,
Oh,
I want to say thank you.
oh, Anna has one last question about where our funding comes from.
Oh, okay, yeah. Our funding comes from three principal sources. First off, from the Law Foundation of British Columbia. Secondly, from the Department of Justice Canada. And thirdly, we receive a tiny, well, it's $50,000, a very small grant from our gaming branch in British Columbia. And so that's our core funding. Sometimes we will respond to calls for proposals for projects. And that will be, if we're successful, that will add to our core funding. But we generally start off our fiscal year with those three principal funders, and we try to supplement their funding with project grants. We may be successful, we may not.
Thanks, Patricia. Last
Oh,
thing
yes.
I'll pop in this. Oh, no, go
And
ahead.
apropos of funding, we want to thank them. And you'll see there, Law Foundation, Department of Justice Canada, oh, and BC Notaries. Forgot to mention them. They provided with us with a very nice grant over the past 2 years, and it is they who actually were instrumental in getting Beagle Plus, generative AI Beagle Plus, up and running in over the past two years. So we want to thank them. And we want to thank you for being such a great audience. And we're happy you're interested in who we are and what we do. And we hope that will be useful in our small way to you and your clients.
Echoing Patricia, thanks. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.